Hi, my name is Gretchen Amberg. I'm here at the Polyform Studios, and today I'm going to show you how to make these boxes, clay covered, and they're meant to be paperclip holders. Kind of a cool way to snazzy up your desk. So, the materials are pretty basic, things you can find at just about any craft store. First thing is one of these paper mache boxes. They come in all kinds of different shapes, round, rectangular, square. I prefer the kind of unusual shapes, so I decided to get a hexagon one. And the first thing you're going to do is just take a mechanical pencil and just trace a line all the way around the bottom edge of the lid. So you've got a mark for yourself when you're putting in the clay around the bottom of the box. And you'll notice as you do this that, you know, these aren't very precision made, so sometimes the angles are a little off, which is also a good reason to make these lines so that when you lay your sheet of clay, if it has to be angled down a little bit, then it's angled down to match the line of the lid. So once you have that on there, the next thing you're going to do is mark the center of the top. And the reason we're marking the center of the top is because we need a hole for the knob to go through. And the edge of a super slicer blade works great as a straight edge. So just get that lined up. Just draw that line across point to point. So we're going to make three lines, and they'll intersect the middle. So got your 3 lines crisscrossing, and that's where you're going to start your hole that your post on the knob will go through. And I've just got a basic needle tool. Preferably keep your fingers out of the way on the bottom. And I'm just going to poke straight through. And then I use, because the material is actually pretty soft, I use one of the etch and pearl tools to just kind of run that through there, and that opens up the hole. You just want it open enough so that the threaded rod part of the knob goes through there easily. I'm actually going to open this up just a little bit more because that's a little bit of a tight fit. You want it to be a little loose so that it slots through there. So that's good. Now that you have your center marked, we're going to add the first bit of clay to the lid. And I've got here a 3/16. It's one of the Kemper cutters, and this is about the diameter of that hole that we punched through the lid. Make sure your sheet of clay is plenty big. You want plenty of overhang. Reason being, you're going to pre-cut the hole in this that you're going to line up over the hole on the lid. So you don't want to cut it too close to size, punch your hole and realize you're just enough off to one side that it's not going to be able to cover around all the sides. So doing it this way just gives you a little bit of wiggle room. So we'll punch that little piece out. And I've got Bacon Bond, and I love using this stuff on wood picture frames that you're covering with clay, or these boxes in particular. The Bacon Bond kind of soaks into the paper of the box, and it gives you just this real nice tacky surface and bonds the clay sheets to the surface nicely, and nothing's going to pry off of there. It's a nice firm bond. So I'm going to lift that up, and I'm just going to line that up, smooth it down with my fingers. And I use, this is one of the Scotch-Brite. It's a non-scratch pad, and I love to use these to texture. and in particular I like texturing on the pearlescent and metallic clays. The texture tends to give it a little more of a frosted look. Oh, and this mixture is half copper and half bronze. And it makes a beautiful kind of cocoa cinnamon color. It's this wonderful, rich, earthy color that I like to use. So with that textured, and texturing it really helps push that clay down onto the surface as well. So it's a dual benefit. It looks nice and it's functional when you're doing these kinds of projects. So you're gonna trim that to the edges. All the way around. Just keep that blade flush up against. Okay. So that covers the top of the box, and you'll notice the box top isn't, when you look at this, it's not super even on the sides. Again, it's not a particularly precision fit, but you know, once you get all the decorations on there and everything, it's fine. The top sheet of clay where you had the hole, it may have shifted a little bit on you when you put it down and start cutting, so I will take the needle tool and go poke through just to make sure I still have a lined up hole. You can see here where it shifted off a little bit. It's not a problem because we're going to add a couple little layered rings on here, so it'll be covered up. It won't be an issue. Now the stem of these knobs tends to be kind of long, so we're going to add those pieces of clay to the lid to raise this up a little bit. If this is too long, and depending on how deep or shallow your box is, you may find that the stem bottoms out in the bottom, which is why we add it. Adds a decorative element, and then it also helps keep this from dropping so far down into the box. So I've got a 1-inch cutter, and this is just copper. I'm going to cut out, and this is rolled on a medium setting. Lift that off there so it's loosened. And I'm going to, with that 3/16 cutter again, cut a hole in the middle. I'll just pluck that out of there with a needle tool. Lift that. Get that centered over the hole, so that's sitting on there. And to give it a little added detail, I've got antique gold Pearlex powder, and we're going to make some little indented lines, and the lines are going to have this Pearlex powder, so you just dip the needle tool in there, tap it off a little bit. You get too much on the needle tool, and as you try to maneuver it into place, it fluffs off of there and doesn't really wipe off of the clay cleanly. So you're just going to lay it down on there, gently press in, and then twist and lift it. Just giving it a twist makes that indent nice and smooth, and you're going to do this kind of like a clock. You know, put it in 12 and then in 6, and you'll do your 3 and 9, and I like slicing a pie. And just go around. So we've got several marks there, and if you want to go in, add some little shallow marks kind of in between. Okay, so you've got your little marks around. Get that out of the way, and we're going to add one more little piece of clay here that'll act as a little bit more of a riser for your knob. And this mixture is 2 part 18 karat gold and 1 part bronze. I think it makes a very nice color. This whole color palette is meant to be kind of on those earthy metallics. So this is a 1/2 inch diameter Kemper cutter, so I'm gonna punch that out. Sometimes you have to use the plunger. If you have to use the plunger, you can put the side that you ended up with the plunger indentation on. You can put that face down, or if it's face up, don't worry about it. The knob is going to rest right on top of there, so that'll be covered. And again, I'm going to take the 3/16 cutter, cut a hole right out of the middle. And I'm going to put this on the top. Just real gently press that down. And thickness wise, this is the widest setting on the clay conditioning machine, folded in half, so it's twice that, so you get a nice little riser on there. Put that to the side, and then we're going to put a sheet on the bottom, and we're going to use that equal part bronze and copper mix again. And I like to peel the label off. I don't think it does any harm to leave it on there, but sometimes I'm a little funny about adhesive being on there, worried that if the adhesive gets hot that it might do something a little funky under the clay. Again, put a nice a thin layer. Too much and the clay will slide around on you. You want enough to just be tacky. You can kind of feel it. Drape the sheet of clay on there. Just smooth. I like to use the heel of my hand. A little more push on there, and then again we're going to hit it with the Scotch-Brite pad to texture it up. Trim away the edges. Lift the excess. So now we have the top and the bottom covered, and you'll bake these in the oven for about 40 minutes. The reason you're baking it for that long is because you've got some really thick elements of clay on the top piece. So let those cool after they're baked, and then we'll move on to the next step. We'll start with the lid. So now we're going to add the side pieces, and I do this in stages. I tend to bake a lot in between steps. You know, if you fumble it, you're not denting all of the work that you just did because it's already baked. And you know, as you handle this, because you're going to do a lot of handling, you're a lot less likely to end up with fingernail marks everywhere. So the sides are done with bronze clay. This is just solid bronze, it's not a mix of anything. And I've rolled a sheet of clay on a medium setting, and we're going to be inserting these. These are cool. I found these in the mosaic section of the craft store. They're these little mirrors. Now these are 1/2-inch diameter mirrors, and what you want to do is, and I have a 1/2-inch cutter here. So how handy is it that I have a cutter that matches the mirror size? You want your sheet of clay to be about the thickness of these mirror pieces. So if you want to kind of test roll a sheet, you say, okay, I want to see if this is about the right thickness. Roll a sheet, cut a circle of 1/2 inch, a 1/2 inch circle out, and then poke the mirror down in there. You want it to be pretty close to flush with the surface of the clay. If it's not flush, you want it to be inset a little bit. You don't want it to be higher than the surface of the clay. You're better off with it being a little lower than the surface of the clay. So what I've got here is just about right. So I start by trimming a strip that is slightly wider than, you know, the width of this edge of the lid of the box. Cutted edge, clean. It doesn't need to be perfectly squared up, because as we add these pieces, we're going to do some trim work anyway. Again, you're going to add a little bacon bond on here, just a little bit, just enough to spread a nice thin, even coating. You know, not only on the box, but on that trimmed edge of that top layer of clay that's on the lid. So that on there, and you don't, because we're texturing this, as you handle it, if you get fingerprints, it's nothing to be worrying about. They're gonna get covered over, which is kind of another added bonus of texturing with that Scotch-Brite pad. So, and just trim that excess off the bottom. Don't worry about being super precise with it, because as you texture this, the clay will shift and kind of bulge, so you'll do a little more refined trimming in a little bit. So texture that up again. Use the blade to trim that away. That over there. And you'll see that the side, you want to try to keep those angles, so cut like that. Just use the side as a guide, so that what you've got is something that all these angles match up. This is a little long. Trim that away. So we've got that on there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut the hole for the mirror to drop into. And I eyeball, and one of the things that I've noticed that really helps me to kind of eyeball if I'm getting something as centered, and you know, my work table tends to be just kind of this jumbled mess, and it's visually a little distracting. So I will lay down just a white piece of paper or a smooth, plain white tile, and that way when you're holding the cutter and you're kind of looking down over it, having just a solid color underneath makes it so much easier for you to really see if you're well, kind of in the middle there. And so in the middle this way and in the middle this way is where you want to be. So that's about right. Cut that out. Use the needle tool to pull the plug. Go back, put a little bit of bacon bond back in that hole, just so that it'll hold the mirror in place. Push the mirror in there. Just smooth that, because when you put the round cutter in there, the bottom edge will kind of bulge a little bit. And I just used the Scotch-Brite pad and And roll the top edge over a little bit, and just then you get the texture all the way around. So, and I do this on every other edge as you go around. So I've already got the other two on there, so I'll put 3 pieces on, and then I'll bake that. With the bottom, you're gonna have to approach this a little differently for the bottom. Where you took your mechanical pencil and you drew that line, that's your guide for lining up the strip of clay. You know, the other one you had just the flat surface of the top, and you were just trimming against all those edges, and here it's a little different. So again, with a little bit of Bacon Bond on there. Just rub that in there really good so it's just tacky. Lay that on there and get it right at about that line, as good as you can get to that line. Texture it. Use the blade to trim the excess away. Same thing again, we're going to cut that hole out for the mirror. We want that hole centered side to side and top to bottom. Cut that out. Pick out the little plug. Put your bacon bond in there. Push the mirror into place. Just pull that over, smooth that down a little bit, and I like to use the edge of the super slicer blade to just kind of refine things down a little bit. So it's probably hard to see, but it's following right on that line, which is what you want. And same thing as I did with the lid, I do every other side first, bake, and then I'll come back to it. And I like to do this because then when I do the remaining sides, I have baked edges to trim along against. Now you could, if you prefer to, do one single strip all the way around. I like doing it this way because you do get a little bit of that uneven. And I also I think it keeps the corners of the shape a little crisper. You have the ability to really kind of pinch those edges and refine everything. So these two sides were previously added and they're already baked on there, so I'm going to show you how I do this. Back to the bacon bond, get that smoothed. Oops. Wrong way. Put it up against that line. Press down, and you're gonna roll that, press it over that corner a little bit. And this part takes a little bit more refining work, a little more kind of trimming and blending, but just like when you added those first 3 pieces, you have that edge to use as a guide to slice along. do on the sides is you just smooth this over, because you get that mica shift effect. You'll notice that the smooth rolled surface has the shine, and where you trim it away you get that dark. So smoothing this over is something you want to do to just kind of get rid of that dark streak. Just take the Scotch-Brite and just so it blends in. And when you look at it now, the mirror may seem kind of out of center. When you get the clay covering on this other side, it'll look right back into place. And you're just going to do the same thing. Take that 1/2-inch circle cutter, get yourself lined up top to bottom and side to side, cut the hole, put the bacon bond in, and then just put the mirror into place. So once you have the other 3 around, you can bake it again. Same thing as the top, just like you did before. Bacon bond, it's all the same thing, lining it up. Just textured. Smoothed over, and here you can see that what I'm talking about. This side hasn't been smoothed over, and you have that dark line. And this side, when you smooth it over, that dark line goes away. So get that smoothed over, get the texture going. Over that top edge. If you've got a lot of overhang from where this laps over this way, you can always just go back in with the blade, trim that little bit of extra off, smooth it over again, and then retexture, and that'll even you out. Same thing, cut your 1/2-inch hole and get your mirror in there. Do the other 2 sides so all 6 sides are covered, and then bake it. I bake them for about 20 minutes and then let them cool down completely. This is definitely not something, because you have the paper inside, that you should toss into water and try to quench. The mirrors too. Another thing you should keep in mind when you're at the store and you're looking for kind of miscellaneous odds and ends and things that you can use for mixed media projects, stay away from plastic beads and little plastic gems and things of that nature. If it's gonna go in the oven, you have to take into consideration what the material is. The last thing you want to do is stink up your house with the smell of burning plastic. So now you've got all 6 sides covered with the clay, and you've got your hole cut out, and you've got your mirror in there. And so we're gonna start adding these details here. And what I've got is, I love using these. They're 4mm Swarovski crystals, and they're the Hot Fix. There's flat back, and then there's the Hot Fix. The Hot Fix have a thin layer of a glue on the back of them, and they work wonderfully because you poke them into the raw clay, and the temperature at which you're baking the clay is hot enough that it melts that adhesive and it binds. It just binds wonderfully with the clay. So these things are on there good. You would really have to dig at them to get them to pop out of there. So first we're going to add this ring around it, and it's just copper clay again, just out of the package. It's that same medium setting that we used when we made the detail on the lid of the box. This is a 3/4 inch cutter. This is from the Sculpey graduated circle cutter set. Oh, pardon me. So I'm going to cut that out. And then a 3/8 size cutter is what makes that window. And the mirror is 1/2 inch, and this is 3/8. So this little ring is going to cover over that mirror a little bit, and actually it's beneficial because if your hole for the mirror is slightly off center, this actually gives you a little bit of adjustment. You can put this ring, you know, scooch it over a little more, and your mirror will then look centered. I'm just gonna, and that's not centered. I'm gonna try, actually sometimes it works better to cut the small hole first and then line up the bigger cutter over it. Dig the plug out. And in this case, just to make sure it really gets on there, I put just a teeny little thin line of bacon bond right up against around the hole, so that when I put this into place, it'll stay put. And just like we added that bit of the detail to the copper ring that we put on the top of the box, it's the antique gold Pearl-Ex powder again. Dip the needle tool in, tap it off. Just put little lines, dab it in there, give it a little bit of a twist. Got that all the way around, and just same thing all the way around the bottom and all the way around the lid. I like to make sure I put the lid on the jar of Pearl-Ex powder and move it far away from myself as soon as I'm done with it, because you know, if you don't, off the edge of the table and then you've got a mess. So the next thing we're going to add are these little circles of clay, and we'll put the hot fix crystals in there. So what I've got here is I'm going back to that mix of 2 part 18 karat gold and 1 part bronze, and we're going to use this excuse me, 5/16 size shape cutter, and I'm just going to cut 2 little circles. You're going to put 1 circle of the clay on each side, and I like putting the clay on and then the gems onto the clay. If you prefer, you can push the hot fix crystal into the circle of clay and then add it on here, but I think having the crystal on there and trying to maneuver it then onto here, you run more risk of things distorting. So that when you put it into position, don't put it right up against the edge of your little decorated circle here, because when you push the crystal in there, the clay will push out a little bit, and you don't want it bumping into this circle and everything kind of, you get these little flats and everything mushes up against each other. So I like to leave myself that little bit of space so that it's got room to kind of stretch out without interfering with anything. Get those on there. And when I put the hot fix crystals on, I like to use these bent nose tweezers. I find they actually work better than the straight tweezers, because when you're trying to put it down in there, you're trying to see if you're centered, and when you're looking down a straight pair of tweezers, everything is right in your way. And the bent nose tweezers give you a better line of sight of what you're doing, because you can actually look straight down on the top of the gem. So you want to just get that centered on there as best as you can. And then I use the back end of my needle tool. The top of the hot fix crystals has a little bit of a flat. So using the back end of a needle tool or the back end of any kind of tool that has that flat really makes it easier to push it down in there. so that you know you're pushing it down in there evenly. You don't have to push it way down in there, just a little bit, just so you know it's sunk in there. The edge of the bottom edge of the stone is kind of under the surface of the clay a little bit. If you put too much bacon bond down there, you may see it kind of squeeze out a little bit. So I'll just take my needle tool and just run that around there. It doesn't bake white, so if you have just a little smudge on there of it, it'll disappear. So that's how you add those details, and you just finish them all the way around the bottom of the box and then all the way around the top. So when you put your lid on, everything, you get the decoration top and bottom, and everything matches up. It's really quite pretty. So bake all of that together for about 20 minutes again. Let it cool down on its own. Now you've got everything done, everything's cooled down, and you're ready to add your pull knob to it. Now if you noticed, there's a magnet that I've got stuck on here, and that's so that when you lift the lid, the paper clips come up with the lid, so you can lift the lid and just pluck a paper clip right off the magnet, which makes it kind of a handy little feature. So these knobs should come with a little nut and washer. You want to make sure you get those off. You're going to just slot that knob, the stem goes right through that hole. The washer, and I finger tighten these. You could always grab a small pair of needle nose pliers to really get it tightened down on there, but you're not pulling a drawer out, so I don't find that having it finger tightened has caused any kind of problem. So you get that threaded on there. Now the magnet is just a basic craft, little round ceramic craft magnets. It's like what you see in your shower curtain liners sometimes. And I use JB Weld, which is a 2-part epoxy. I tried super glue at first, but I think it was just too thin. It didn't really seem to stick around it to hold everything together while it was curing. And JB Weld is super industrial stuff, and I use it for a lot of things actually. Now it's not clear. It is kind of a charcoaly black gray when it cures, so it's not the kind of thing you want to use to attach anything together where it's going to be the glue may show, because yuck. Do you have a small, what I'm going to do here? You want a piece of paper. I don't have a piece of paper, but it's one of the benefits of having the little leftover wrappers from blocks of clay, because you're going to end up just discarding this. I keep mine in a jar separated from everything, and I keep a little pin. It's just a little basic sewing pin, and that's what I use to mix. So it's like most of these 2 parts, you've got a base and you've got a hardener. And you need equal parts of each. And this may seem like it's going to be a lot of glue, but I want a nice big blob, because then I have it sticking on the magnet, and then it kind of forms up around the stem of that knob, so that everything's nicely encased together. You get just a little point of contact, and it's not as stable. So I got the hardener in there, and you can see this color here that you see, that kind of mucky dark gray. That's the color it will cure. So I put it on the magnet instead of putting it on the stem of the knob, and I just get a nice big glob. And the other nice thing is the magnet will stick to the stem from the knob, so it actually works out really well because it's magnet's going to be held to that stem naturally while the epoxy stuff here sets. So you just kind of get that nestled in there. You can see that the magnet will just stay right put. And what I do while I'm letting it cure is I just set the lid upside down on the top of the box so that it sits level while the epoxy cures. And different epoxies cure at different rates. So if you're not using JB Weld but another brand, you know, just read the label. I find that after just a few hours, it's set enough that I can start using it, but I tend to give things a good 72 hours before I start messing with them. So there you have it. Decorate your desk.